The Nashville Number System is a code that changed country music forever. For 30 years, nobody outside Music Row knew it existed. It was a handwritten shorthand on a piece of paper that a small group of Nashville musicians used to walk into a recording studio, hear a song for the very first time, and lay down a radio-ready performance in a single take. No rehearsals, no sheet music. Just the clock, ticking. For 30 years, that code existed only inside the walls of Music Row. You could not look it up, and you could not find it in any textbook. The only way you learned it was if someone already inside the machine decided to show you. And most of the time, they did not bother. This is the story of the Nashville Number System, the secret language that silently powered every country hit of the 90s, and the man who invented it out of pure desperation. To understand where it came from, you have to go back to the late 1950s. Nashville was turning into a recording machine, and the pressure on session musicians was relentless. A vocal group called the Jordanaires, best known for backing Elvis Presley on almost everything he ever recorded, were running a schedule that would break most professional musicians today. They did 3 recording sessions per day, and sometimes 3 to 4 songs per session. On their worst days, they were expected to memorize harmony parts for 15 completely different songs before midnight. Nobody handed them sheet music. They got lyrics, the key of the song, and a rough idea of the structure. Then the tape rolled. One of the founding members, Neil Matthews Jr., described the chaos from inside it. The sessions were so hectic, he wrote, that the group was forced to rely on hand signals, eye contact, whispering, and punching each other in the arm just to communicate between takes. This wasn't a struggling band in a garage. It was the professional music industry in Nashville at its commercial peak, organized chaos with the meter running. Matthews needed a solution. What he came up with was deceptively simple. Instead of writing out chord names, which are key-specific and have to be completely rewritten every time a singer wants the song a step higher or lower, Matthews assigned each chord a number. The system borrowed from centuries-old Roman numeral analysis, but stripped it down entirely for the recording studio. No staff paper, no theory textbooks, just a notepad and a pencil. The 1 chord was the root of whatever key you were in. The 4 chord was built off the 4th note of that scale, and the 5 chord off the 5th. 7 numbers, total. That could describe the harmonic structure of almost any song ever written, in any key, in any genre, on a single line of a notepad. Transposing a song to a different key, something that used to mean stopping the entire session, was suddenly a non-event. The real power showed up when a singer changed their mind. Under the old system, a key change meant stopping everything, crossing out the chord letters, rewriting the chart from scratch, and hoping nobody lost the momentum in the room. Under the number system, nothing changed at all. The numbers stayed identical, and you just started from a different root note. The problem that used to halt a session for 15 minutes was gone. Matthews built the system as a shorthand for vocal parts. Charlie McCoy, a harmonica player and multi-instrumentalist who became one of the most recorded session musicians in Nashville history, and a regular face on the television show Hee Haw, took that same logic and expanded it into full chord charts for the rhythm section. Now the entire band was communicating in the same compressed key-independent language. A chart that might have taken an hour in standard notation could be sketched in 5 minutes. What used to need rewriting 3 times could now be used unchanged, regardless of what key the artist walked in with. The system took root at RCA Studio B on Music Row, the flagship recording facility that Chet Atkins managed from 1957 onward. Just down the street from Owen Bradley's Quonset Hut studio, where Bradley had been building the Nashville sound alongside Atkins, the session economy was running at full speed. RCA Studio B was the room where that sound was being invented, and session musicians were the full-time employees of a hit-making production line. The players who became the first call for every session, guitarists like Harold Bradley and Grady Martin, pianist Floyd Kramer, and the rotating cast of specialists who made up what the industry quietly called the A-Team, Nashville's elite pool of first-call session players, all operated in the same rooms, under the same pressures, and increasingly in the same numerical shorthand. Because the players who knew the number system were the players getting the most work, it became the standard. There was no official announcement, no formal policy, just the natural logic of the session economy. You knew the numbers, you got the calls. You didn't know them, you didn't work. For the next 3 decades, that closed loop stayed exactly as it was. The Nashville Number System spread from musician to musician, inside sessions in real time. There was no guide, no course, and no institution that taught it. Guitarist Mark O'Connor moved to Nashville in 1983 specifically to build a session career, and years later he described the experience plainly. He had to learn it bit by bit, just trying to keep up. Coming in without it was like arriving at a job where everyone else already spoke a language nobody had told you existed. That finally changed in 1988, when a session musician named Chaz Williams sat down and wrote the first book that ever documented how the system actually worked, in full detail, from the ground up. He published it himself, and for years it spread the same way the system had spread for 3 decades, by word of mouth between players. Eventually, Berklee College of Music adopted it as a required text. So did Belmont University and Middle Tennessee State University. The code that had been quietly gatekept inside Music Row since the late 1950s was finally available to anyone who wanted to learn it. But by then, it had already done its most important work. The 1990s were the commercial explosion of country music, and underneath every hit was the same small, efficient pool of Nashville session players, the A-Team's direct descendants, all operating on the same system. Brent Mason is the name that defines that era. A guitarist originally from Van Wert, Ohio, Mason arrived in Nashville in the early 1980s and was discovered by Chet Atkins himself. By the peak of the 90s, he was running up to 23 sessions per week. Over the course of his career, Mason played on more than 1,000 albums, and in 2008, he won a Grammy Award for Best Country Instrumental Performance. George Strait, Alan Jackson, Shania Twain, Randy Travis, Tim McGraw, Reba McEntire, Trisha Yearwood. That list covers essentially the entire decade of 90s country radio. He won the Academy of Country Music Guitarist of the Year award 14 times and was nominated for CMA Musician of the Year every single year starting in 1991. On every one of those sessions, Brent Mason walked in with a handwritten number chart and started playing. That was the machine. A standard Nashville session ran 3 hours, and in those 3 hours, a typical crew would produce 3 complete recordings, fully arranged, fully performed, and ready for vocals. Session musicians could learn entire albums worth of material in hours rather than days. Producers could change keys on a whim without stopping the clock. The number system was the reason all of that was possible, and because almost nobody outside Music Row understood it was even happening, the session players who built those records stayed completely invisible. The stars got the credit, the numbers did the work. Neil Matthews didn't set out to invent a revolution. He needed a way to survive a 15-song Tuesday in a Nashville studio without his group losing their minds. But what he built became the invisible infrastructure underneath the most commercially successful decade in country music history. Every time Alan Jackson's voice sits over that rolling, authoritative electric guitar, that's the number system at work. When a Garth Brooks record wraps around you with that warm, layered, lived-in sound, that's the system too. And every time a 90s country song comes on and something in you responds before you even consciously register the chord change. That's what happens when a small group of extraordinary musicians all speak the same private language, perfectly, in real time, without ever once reading a note. The Nashville Number System was never supposed to leave Music Row. For 30 years, it didn't. Then Chaz Williams wrote it down, and the whole world found out what the best session players in country music had known all along. The most powerful systems are usually the simplest ones. They just look like magic from the outside.